Simple woman, single mom, helped a soaking soldier in the rain. What happened next will shock. The rain never seemed to stop in Oakridge that evening. It was one of those storms where the sky felt endless, as though it were pouring everything it had left. Maria, a single mother, was exhausted from working a double shift at the diner, her body aching with each movement. She only wanted to get home, take a warm shower, and comfort her son, Leo. But fate had something else in store for her. As she drove through the soaked streets, she noticed a figure standing by the side of the road. A soldier, drenched, his face weary and distant. His uniform was soaked, his boots muddied from the rain. Maria had a choice: to drive on like everyone else or pull over. A simple decision, one that would change her life forever. What she didn't know was that this single act of kindness would set off a chain of events that neither of them could have anticipated. Maria's car hummed softly as she navigated the empty streets of Oakridge. The rain poured relentlessly, the wipers struggling to keep up with the downpour. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white from the tension of the day. She was tired, exhausted, really, but her mind was still racing with the tasks she had to handle once she got home. Leo, her 8-year-old son, would need to be fed, bathed, and tucked in. There were bills to pay, laundry to fold, and the looming uncertainty of how she was going to make ends meet. But as she rounded the corner near the edge of town, something caught her eye: a figure standing motionless in the rain, just barely visible through the thick mist. A soldier, his uniform drenched, his posture slumped as if the storm had weighed him down entirely. She had to squint to see clearly, the light from her headlights reflecting off the slick pavement. He looked lost, like a ghost caught in the storm, not moving, not even looking around. Maria's heart tightened, a wave of empathy washing over her. She slowed the car, her instincts kicking in. Her mind screamed at her to keep going. She had enough on her plate, but something in her gut told her to stop. She couldn't just leave him there, not like that. She pulled over to the side of the road, the engine sputtering quietly as the wipers fought to clear the windshield. She rolled down the window slightly, the rush of rain flooding the space. "Do you need help?" Maria called out, her voice barely rising above the storm's fury. The soldier didn't respond at first. His gaze remained distant, unfocused, as if he couldn't even hear her. She repeated herself, her voice gentler this time. "Do you need help?" This time, he looked at her. His eyes were tired, empty. I don't know," he muttered, his voice hoarse, as if speaking was too much of an effort. "I've been standing out here for a while. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be." Maria didn't hesitate. "Come on, get in," she said. "You're not going to make it out here like this." The soldier didn't argue. He nodded slowly, then climbed into the passenger seat. Maria was struck by how much he seemed to sag, his shoulders weighed down by something heavier than the storm itself. He didn't speak again as she started the car and drove through the rain, the windshield wipers moving in a rhythmic pattern that did little to ease the tension in the air. The soldier's silence was thick, as if the very act of speaking was too much for him. Maria stole glances at him, but he kept his gaze fixed outside the window, lost in the storm, or perhaps in his own thoughts. The rain hit the car with a deafening roar, but inside, there was a strange stillness. It wasn't awkward, not exactly. It was just heavy, as if the world outside had ceased to exist for both of them. As they drove, Maria's thoughts drifted to her own struggles, the bills piling up, the endless hours she worked just to scrape by. She couldn't help but wonder what had brought this soldier here, why he was standing out in the middle of the storm. But she didn't ask him. It didn't seem right to pry, especially when he seemed so broken. She could feel his pain in the silence, even if she didn't understand it. The car slowed as they neared her house. Maria glanced over at the soldier again, his face shadowed, his eyes hollow. There was something in him, something deep, something that resonated with her. She couldn't explain it. It wasn't just the rain. It wasn't just that he was a soldier, or that he was lost. It was the way he seemed to carry the weight of something far greater than what was visible. She turned the car into the driveway, the headlights casting a soft glow on the front steps of her small home. Leo, her son, was running up the steps, his small silhouette a blur in the dim light. He stopped when he saw the soldier in the passenger seat, his expression curious. "Mom?" Leo called out, his voice carrying across the rain. "Who's that?" Maria's heart sank. She hadn't planned for this moment, hadn't thought about what Leo might make of the situation. She glanced over at the soldier, unsure of how to explain. "This is a soldier, honey," Maria said, her voice soft but steady. "He needed some help." The soldier looked down at Leo, and for the first time, a small flicker of something, a smile, perhaps, crossed his face. "Hello, little man," he said quietly, his voice raspy, but there was a gentleness to it. Leo, completely unbothered by the situation, simply nodded. "Hi," he chirped, oblivious to the weight in the room. "Are you going to stay with us?" Maria's chest tightened. The question was innocent, and yet, the reality of the situation was anything but. She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "No, honey. He's just stopping by to get warm." With that, Leo skipped inside, his mind already moving on to other things. Maria, on the other hand, couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this small act of kindness, was the beginning of something much bigger than just offering a ride on a stormy night. She led the soldier inside, the warmth of the house a stark contrast to the wet chill of the storm outside. The living room was cozy, cluttered with toys and books, a stark reflection of Maria's busy life. She offered him a towel and some dry clothes, and though he hesitated, he accepted. He looked like he hadn't had a good night's sleep in a long time. "You can sit down for a bit," Maria offered. "I'll make you something warm." He nodded, sitting stiffly on the couch, his gaze still unfocused, as if he were somewhere far away. Maria set about making tea, the steam rising from the kettle as it whistled gently. She couldn't stop thinking about him. This soldier who had appeared out of nowhere, in the midst of a storm, seemingly lost, both physically and emotionally. When the tea was ready, Maria set the mug down in front of him. "Here," she said softly. "It'll help you warm up." He nodded again, but this time, there was a quiet gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Maria sat across from him, watching him carefully. She wanted to ask him what had happened, what had brought him here, but the words didn't come. She knew that whatever his story was, it was something too heavy for him to speak of yet. Instead, she simply watched him, the silence between them comfortable, though still filled with an unspoken understanding. He had been through something that had broken him, and Maria felt the weight of that in every glance. The storm outside seemed to grow worse, the wind howling as the rain continued to pour. But inside, Maria felt a sense of calm. The soldier's presence was strange, almost surreal, but there was a quiet connection between them, one that neither of them had anticipated. Eventually, he stood, his movements slow but deliberate. "I should get going," he said quietly. "I'll be all right." Maria hesitated. She had invited him in, offered him warmth, but now it felt wrong to send him back out into the storm. But she knew she couldn't keep him. The world wasn't that simple. "Thank you," he said again, his voice thick with emotion. Maria smiled, though her heart was heavy. "You're welcome." She watched him leave, his figure disappearing into the rain, and for a moment, she stood there, uncertain of what had just happened. But one thing was clear, this was just the beginning. The knock on her door would come soon enough, and when it did, everything would change. As she closed the door behind her, Maria knew that the storm outside wasn't the only thing that had swept through her life. She had no idea what was coming next, but in that quiet moment, she felt something stir in her, something that had been buried for a long time: hope. Maria spent the next day in a haze of routine, her mind still reeling from the unexpected encounter with the soldier. She had made it through the long hours of work at the diner, but something about the soldier's presence stayed with her. The weight in his eyes, the exhaustion in his voice, it all felt like a burden she couldn't fully comprehend. Still, she pushed the thoughts to the back of her mind. She had her own life to manage. Leo needed her. The bills were stacking up, and the laundry basket was overflowing. The next evening, the rain had stopped, but the air still felt thick and heavy with the remnants of the storm. Maria had just finished putting Leo to bed, his soft snoring a reminder of the innocence she worked so hard to protect. She stood in the kitchen, sipping her coffee, the faint glow of the lamp casting a soft light across the small, cluttered room. As she stared out the window into the quiet night, her mind wandered back to the soldier. Jack, as he had introduced himself. What was he running from? What had left him so broken? The knock at the door came just as Maria was lost in her thoughts, pulling her out of her reverie. She wasn't expecting anyone, especially not tonight, not after everything she'd already dealt with. She set her mug down and walked to the door, her pulse quickening. She hesitated for just a moment before reaching for the handle. When she opened the door, the sight of Jack standing there didn't surprise her as much as it should have. His face was still tired, his eyes still holding the same haunted look, but he was different somehow, softer, maybe more vulnerable than the night before. "Jack," she said, surprised by the way her heart fluttered. "What are you doing here?" He stood there, rain still clinging to his uniform despite the clear sky overhead. He looked almost ashamed, as if he didn't know how to explain why he had returned. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said, his voice low, "but I wanted to thank you again for helping me yesterday. I didn't realize how much I needed it." Maria felt a pang in her chest. She hadn't expected him to come back. She hadn't expected anything from him at all. It wasn't about that. It was just a simple act of kindness, something she did without thinking. But now, here he was, standing in front of her, seeking something she didn't understand. "You don't need to thank me," she replied softly. "It was just a ride. You were out there in the storm." Jack nodded slowly, stepping over the threshold without waiting for an invitation. He looked around the small house, his gaze lingering on the few personal touches Maria had added. Family photos on the wall, Leo's drawings taped to the refrigerator. It was nothing extravagant, just a simple home, but it was hers. "I never should have put you in this position," Jack said, his voice almost a whisper. "You didn't have to help me. I'm a stranger. You didn't owe me anything." Maria felt a strange sympathy for him. He was clearly wrestling with something deep inside, something he wasn't ready to share, but she could feel it. "Sometimes people just need help," she said quietly, standing back to allow him into the living room. "It's not about owing anyone anything. It's just being human." Jack stood there for a moment, taking in the warmth of the room, the soft flicker of the candlelight. Maria watched him, her heart heavy with the realization that his visit wasn't just a token gesture of gratitude. There was something more beneath the surface. "I can't stay long," he said, pulling himself from his thoughts. "I just wanted to say thank you. And I don't know if you can understand this, but I don't have anyone to talk to. Not like this. I've been through things I can't share with just anyone. But you listened. You didn't judge me." Maria bit her lip, feeling the weight of his words settle in the air between them. She wasn't sure what he was asking of her, but something in his eyes told her that whatever it wasn't just about what happened the night before. It was about something deeper, something that had broken him, something that had pushed him to the edge. She took a deep breath. "I'm just a waitress, Jack. I don't have any special wisdom to offer, but I can listen. I'm good at that." He smiled weakly, his eyes flickering with a hint of gratitude. "I've been running from the truth for so long. I don't know where to start." Maria motioned for him to sit, and he did, collapsing onto the couch as if the weight of the world had finally caught up with him. She sat across from him, unsure of where this conversation would go. She had invited him in for a cup of tea, not to dive into something so complicated, so painful. But now that he was here, she couldn't turn away. "I don't know how much I should say," Jack continued, his voice raw. "I've been in the military for years, too many years. I thought it was what I needed, what I was meant to do. But now, it feels like I've lost everything. I don't even know who I am anymore." Maria listened carefully, her heart aching for him. She didn't know much about the military or what it was like to live through such intense experiences, but she could sense the depth of his pain. The way he spoke about it, about losing himself, reminded her of the way she sometimes felt after a long day, as if she had given so much of herself that there was nothing left to give. "You've been through a lot," Maria said softly. "I can't pretend to understand, but I do know this. People don't lose themselves all at once. Sometimes it's just one little piece at a time. And sometimes, those pieces find their way back." Jack glanced at her, a flicker of something like hope in his eyes, but he quickly looked away. "I'm not sure if I believe that anymore." Maria hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She had always believed that people could heal, that time and kindness had a way of putting things back together. But Jack's situation was different. He wasn't just broken from the outside. Something had shattered deep inside him, and no amount of kindness from a stranger could fix that. "Maybe you don't have to believe it yet," Maria said gently. "But sometimes the right people can help you find your way back. You don't have to do it alone." The silence between them stretched on for a long moment. Jack was deep in thought, his brow furrowed as if he were contemplating something far beyond the walls of her small living room. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "I don't know why I'm telling you all of this," he admitted. "I don't usually talk about it, not to anyone. But something about you. I don't know. Maybe it's because you helped me when no one else would." Maria didn't have an answer for that. She didn't know why she had helped him either. Maybe it was because she saw something in him, a kind of vulnerability that reminded her of her own struggles. Maybe it was just because she knew what it felt like to be lost, to need someone to pull you out of the storm. "Well, I'm glad I could help," Maria said, her voice soft but firm. "But you don't have to carry all of this by yourself, Jack. There are people who want to help." Jack looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time, she saw a hint of something other than pain. Gratitude, relief, maybe even hope. "I don't know what's going to happen next," he said quietly. "But thank you. You've given me something I didn't expect, a little bit of peace." Maria smiled softly, a warmth spreading through her chest. She didn't know where this would lead or what Jack's future held, but in that moment, she realized that helping him had somehow given her a sense of peace, too. It wasn't about the soldier, or his past, or what had happened before. It was about the simple act of kindness, of offering someone a moment of rest in the storm. Jack stood to leave, and as he reached the door, he paused. "I don't know if I'll be back," he said, his voice hesitant. "But I wanted to let you know, you helped me more than you think." Maria nodded, her heart full. "Take care of yourself, Jack. I hope you find what you're looking for." As Jack disappeared into the night, Maria stood there, staring at the empty doorway. She had no idea what the future held for him, or for her. But she knew one thing. Sometimes, a simple act of kindness could change the course of a life. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The following days drifted by in a blur of routine. The weather had cleared up, and Oakridge seemed quieter after the storm. The streets were drying, and the lingering dampness in the air reminded Maria of the night she had helped Jack. She hadn't seen him again since that evening, but the memory of his haunted eyes, his broken words, stayed with her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had only seen the surface of his pain, that there was more to him than he had let on. Still, life went on. Leo needed her, and work was as demanding as ever. It was easy to slip back into the rhythm of daily life. But then, one afternoon, everything changed. Maria was folding laundry in the living room when she heard the knock at the door. She paused, her heart skipping a beat. It was sharp, persistent, a sound that carried an urgency she couldn't ignore. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was just past 4 p.m. She wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, she stood up, her body tense as she approached the door. Her mind raced, thinking back to all the possible reasons someone might come knocking at this hour. It could be a neighbor, or a delivery, nothing out of the ordinary. But something in her gut told her that this knock was different. Maria opened the door cautiously. Standing on her doorstep was a man she didn't recognize. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his demeanor professional, yet there was something about him that made her feel uneasy. His eyes were intense, his expression unreadable. "Are you Maria Turner?" he asked, his voice firm but polite. Maria's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, I am," she replied, her voice guarded. "Who are you?" "My name is Gregory Holt," the man said, producing a sleek black envelope from inside his coat. "I've been asked to deliver something to you." He handed the envelope over without hesitation, his movements precise. His gaze lingered on her for a moment before he stepped back slightly, allowing Maria to take the envelope. Maria's fingers brushed against the cool paper. Something about it felt strange, too formal, too official. She frowned, looking back up at Gregory. "What is this?" she asked, her voice slightly trembling. "What's it about?" Gregory didn't answer right away. Instead, he gave her a polite, but distant, smile. "I'm simply delivering it. You'll find the contents inside. I must be going now." Before Maria could ask another question, he turned and walked briskly down the driveway, disappearing into the street without another word. Maria watched him leave, her mind spinning. What was this all about? What could possibly be so urgent? With trembling hands, she closed the door and tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter, the paper heavy and crisp. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the first few lines. "Dear Maria Turner, you may not know me, but I am reaching out to you because of something you did recently. You helped my son, And for that, I am deeply grateful. I have heard of your kindness, and I believe that you have the ability to help me further. There are matters that need to be discussed, and I would like to meet with you as soon as possible. Your involvement in this situation may be more important than you realize. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. I look forward to our meeting. Harrison Rivers. The letter was signed in bold ink, but what struck Maria the most was the name, Harrison Rivers. She knew that name. Jack, the soldier she had helped, the man who had wandered into her life on that stormy night. His father was a wealthy businessman, someone she had heard of only in passing, but never thought she would ever encounter. She read the letter again, her mind racing. What could this possibly mean? Why was Harrison Rivers reaching out to her? She had only given Jack a ride and a warm place to stay for a few hours. What could she possibly have to do with anything larger? Her hands shook as she held the letter, her thoughts whirling. She couldn't deny the growing sense of unease that bubbled up inside her. She had only done what felt right in the moment. But now, it seemed like her simple act of kindness had opened a door to something far more complicated. The phone on the kitchen counter buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. Maria jumped, startled by the sudden noise. She walked over and glanced at the screen. The number was unfamiliar, but she hesitated for only a second before answering. "Hello?" she said, trying to steady her voice. "Maria Turner?" Came a deep voice on the other end. It was warm, but laced with urgency. "Yes, this is she," Maria replied, her heartbeat quickening. "Who is this?" "This is Gregory Holt again," he said. "I'm following up on the letter. I believe you've received it." "Yes, I did." Maria's throat went dry. She felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. "What is all of this about?" "I can't explain everything over the phone," Gregory said, his voice tight. "But I believe you and Mr. Rivers need to meet. You were more than just a kind stranger to his son. You're now involved in something much bigger than you realize." The words hit Maria like a punch to the gut. She wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but something in Gregory's voice told her that pressing too much would only make things more complicated. "I understand," Maria said, trying to keep her composure. "When do you want to meet?" "Tomorrow. Please be at the Rivers estate by 10 a.m., Gregory replied. "Mr. Rivers will be expecting you." The line went dead before Maria could respond, leaving her standing there, the phone still pressed to her ear. Her mind was racing, her thoughts scattered. What was happening? Why was Jack's father reaching out to her, and why now, after so long? The next morning, Maria woke up early, the weight of the letter still heavy on her mind. She had hardly slept, the anticipation gnawing at her. The Rivers estate. She had never been to a place like that before, grand, polished, and full of people whose lives were so different from hers. She dressed carefully, choosing something simple yet professional, something that would allow her to blend in, even though she felt completely out of place. As she drove through Oakridge and then onto the private road that led to the estate, she felt her nerves building. The mansion loomed in the distance, towering against the clear sky, a symbol of everything she didn't have. When she arrived, she was greeted by a doorman who led her into the house. The halls were cold, marble floors gleaming beneath her feet. It was beautiful, yes, but it felt like a different world, one that she didn't belong in. Gregory Holt was waiting for her in a large sitting room. He rose from his seat when she entered, offering a polite smile, but his expression was tense. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Mr. Rivers is expecting you." Maria nodded, though her stomach churned. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the grand hallway as Gregory led her deeper into the house. When they reached a large door, he knocked twice before pushing it open. Inside, a man stood by the window, his back to her. Harrison Rivers. He turned slowly, and for a moment, Maria couldn't find the words. He was older than she had imagined, but there was a strength to him, an air of authority. He looked every bit the part of a wealthy businessman, but there was something in his eyes, something unsettling. "Maria," he said, his voice low but welcoming. "Thank you for coming." Maria stepped forward, feeling small in the vastness of the room. "You wanted to speak to me?" Harrison nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "Yes, there are things about my son, Jack, that I need you to understand. You've already helped him more than you know. But now, there's more at stake." Maria took a seat, unsure of what to expect. She had no idea what was going on, but she knew one thing for sure. The storm she had walked into that night was only just beginning to reveal its true force. Maria sat in the grand sitting room of the Rivers estate, trying to focus on Harrison Rivers' words as he paced before her. The silence between them was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable, not yet. Gregory Holt, who had led her inside, stood in the corner, his arms crossed, watching intently. Maria couldn't shake the feeling that everyone in this room knew something she didn't. Something crucial, something she wasn't yet allowed to understand. Harrison Rivers stopped pacing and turned to face her, his eyes cold yet intense. "You may be wondering why I've asked you here," he began, his voice smooth and controlled. "Why a simple act of kindness, helping my son, has led to this meeting." Maria swallowed hard. "I am," she admitted, her voice quieter than she intended. She could feel her nerves getting the best of her. The mansion around her, the silence, the heavy air, it all felt too much. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to being in a room with people like them, with this kind of wealth and power. She felt small, like a ghost in a place she didn't belong. Harrison didn't seem to notice her unease. He walked slowly towards the window, gazing out at the sprawling grounds. The sunlight cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn, and the quiet hum of the estate's air conditioning system was the only sound that filled the room. Maria shifted in her seat, her thoughts scattered. "My son, Jack," Harrison continued, his voice steady, "is not just any soldier. He's been involved in something much more dangerous than he's told you. Something much bigger than either of us." Maria felt a sharp breath catch in her chest. She hadn't imagined it. She hadn't even dared to consider that there was more to Jack's story than he had let on. But now, hearing the gravity in Harrison's voice, she couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread curling in her stomach. "Dangerous," Maria repeated, trying to make sense of it. "What are you talking about?" Harrison turned back to face her, his expression harder now. "Jack is caught in a web of secrets, Maria. There's been a covert operation he was part of, a mission that went wrong. A mission that we've been trying to cover up, to keep quiet. He's been marked. And now, people are looking for him. Looking for both of us. And, by extension, looking for you." Maria felt the blood drain from her face as the words sank in. "Looking for me?" She echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't understand. Why would they be looking for me?" Harrison's gaze never wavered, and his expression remained unreadable. "Because you're connected to him. You gave him help when no one else would. You took him in when he was vulnerable. And because of that, you're now part of a larger problem." Maria's mind was spinning. "I didn't do anything wrong," she protested, though her voice trembled. "I didn't ask for any of this." Harrison's face softened, just for a moment. "I know. You're not to blame for any of this. But Jack's involvement in this mission, it's dangerous, and it's complicated. He knows things that certain people are willing to do anything to keep secret. And now that you've helped him, you're a target too." Maria couldn't breathe. The weight of his words hit her like a physical force. She felt her chest tighten, the air around her becoming thick and suffocating. She wanted to argue, to tell him that this wasn't her fight, that she was just a woman who had done what felt right at the time. But deep down, she knew that wasn't enough anymore. She had stepped into a world she didn't understand, and now she was caught up in something much larger than herself. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice cracking. "What do you want from me?" Harrison's gaze softened, a flicker of something almost like empathy crossing his features. "I'm not asking you to do anything, Maria. Not yet. But I need you to understand that you're now part of this. I'm not here to ask for your help. I'm here to give you a choice." Maria's head was spinning. "A choice? Whether you want to stay involved or not?" Harrison said calmly, stepping closer. "If you choose to walk away from this, if you want to leave everything behind and go back to your life, I won't stop you. I'll make sure you and your son are protected. No one will know you were ever involved." Maria's heart pounded in her chest. Could she really walk away from all of this? Could she simply go back to her normal life and forget that Jack existed, forget what she had done for him? But then she thought of the way Jack had looked when she helped him, the way his face had softened when he saw Leo. She couldn't just turn her back on him now, could she? "I can't just walk away," Maria said softly, her voice full of uncertainty. But there was something in her chest that told her she couldn't ignore this. "I don't know what this is all about, but I can't pretend it's not happening. Not after everything." Harrison studied her carefully, his eyes sharp. "You're making the right decision," he said, his voice low, almost approving. But you need to understand the risks involved. There's no going back once you've chosen this path. The room seemed to grow quieter, the air heavier. Maria swallowed hard, her mind racing. What had she gotten herself into? What had Jack dragged her into? And what did it mean for Leo? She had to protect him. He was her world, her everything. Could she really bring him into this mess? "We'll help you," Harrison continued, his tone more earnest now. "You won't be alone in this. But we need you to be strong, Maria. This goes beyond Jack's disappearance. There are people who would do anything to keep these secrets buried. And if they think you have any knowledge of them, of what Jack knows, they won't hesitate to come after you." Maria felt her chest tighten as his words sank in. She couldn't escape this. No matter how much she wished she could go back to her quiet life in Oakridge, the reality was inescapable. She had already crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. "Jack doesn't deserve any of this," Maria said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "He didn't ask for this either. He's just a man who's been caught in something bigger than himself." Harrison's eyes darkened slightly, but there was a hint of something almost fatherly in his gaze. "He's not just a man, Maria. He's the key to everything. What Jack knows could change everything. The people we're up against are dangerous. They won't stop until they have what they want." Maria nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy blanket. She wanted to believe she could walk away from this. She wanted to believe that she could simply go back to her life and never look back. But deep down, she knew that was impossible now. Jack had asked for her help, and she couldn't just leave him behind. "All right," Maria said, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside her. "What do you need me to do?" Harrison looked at her for a long moment, as though weighing her resolve. Finally, he nodded, as if making a decision. "First, we need to find Jack. He's in more danger than he knows. And when we do, we'll need your help to protect him. You'll be the only one who can get to him, the only one he trusts." Maria felt her pulse quicken, the fear and the uncertainty swirling together. But there was something else in her chest now, something stronger than the fear. It was a sense of duty, of responsibility. She had crossed a line, yes, but she would do whatever it took to help Jack and to keep her son safe. Harrison stepped back, his face hardening again. "If you're ready, we'll move forward. But once we do, there's no turning back." Maria nodded, her resolve hardening. "I'm ready." As the silence stretched between them, Maria realized that her life was no longer hers to control. She had chosen this path, and now there was no turning back. She could only move forward and hope that she was strong enough to survive whatever was coming next. The days following Maria's decision passed in a blur of unease. She tried to focus on her normal routine. Caring for Leo, making sure he was well-fed and settled into bed each night, heading out to work, as usual. But there was a constant undercurrent of tension that kept gnawing at her. The weight of her decision to become involved in Jack's world, in Harrison River's dangerous world, was never far from her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, the images of the mansion, the shadowy figures, the whispered warnings from Gregory Holt replayed in her mind. Could she really handle this? Could she protect Leo from whatever storm was brewing? Her phone buzzed in the middle of one quiet evening, snapping her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the name, Gregory Holt. She took a steadying breath before answering. "Maria Turner," she said, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "Maria." Gregory's voice was calm, but laced with an undertone of urgency. "We need you to meet us tomorrow. It's time." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. It was time. The moment had arrived. She had known this day was coming, but hearing it out loud made it feel all too real. The consequences of her choices, the risks, the unknowns, all of it was coming to a head. "Where?" she asked, her voice steady despite the nerves flooding her chest. "At the old warehouse on the outskirts of town. Do you know it?" Gregory replied. Maria's stomach dropped. She didn't know the warehouse. It was a decrepit building, hidden away behind overgrown trees and a long-forgotten road. The perfect place to meet when you didn't want to be seen, when you had things to discuss that couldn't be overheard. Her mind raced with thoughts of what might happen there, but she pushed them aside. She had already made the decision to stand by Jack, and now there was no turning back. "Yes, I know it," Maria said, the words coming out more clipped than she intended. "What time?" 10 a.m., Gregory said, a pause hanging between them. Be careful, Maria. There's a lot at stake here. The call ended abruptly, and Maria stood in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. Be careful. Of course, she'd be careful. But what did that even mean in a situation like this? Could she really be careful when the very foundation of her life, her son, her future, everything she had worked for, was about to be thrown into the chaos of this world? That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to steady her breath. She had no choice but to follow through. For Jack, for Leo, she would go to that warehouse and face whatever came. She had already seen the warning signs. But now, it was too late to walk away. The next morning, she woke up early. The sun hadn't even risen yet, and she felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Leo was still asleep, his small, peaceful form curled up in his bed. Maria kissed his forehead gently, trying not to wake him, and then slipped out of the room. As she dressed, she kept her mind focused, tried not to think about the uncertainty waiting for her at the warehouse. She chose something simple, jeans and a shirt, nothing that would stand out. She needed to blend in, to stay under the radar, as much as she could. When she was ready, she grabbed her keys and left the house, locking the door behind her. The drive to the warehouse was long and quiet. The early morning mist still clung to the air, and the streets were empty as she made her way through Oakridge. Her mind raced as she drove, the weight of her decision pushing her forward. She had no idea what awaited her at the warehouse. Would she be walking into a trap? Would she be forced to do something she wasn't prepared for? And most importantly, would Leo be safe? When she arrived at the warehouse, the place looked even more desolate than she remembered. It was a huge building, the kind that had been abandoned for years, the windows covered in grime, the door creaking with every gust of wind. There was no one in sight. The entire area seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. Maria's heart began to race as she parked her car at the edge of the lot. She sat there for a moment, staring at the dark, empty building. She could turn around, go home, pretend none of this had ever happened. But the thought of Jack, alone, in whatever danger he was facing, made her hands shake. She couldn't turn back now. Steeling herself, Maria stepped out of the car and made her way toward the entrance. As she neared the door, it creaked open, and a familiar figure stepped into view. Gregory Holt. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable, but his eyes searched her face as she approached. Maria, he said, his voice low. I'm glad you came. Is Jack here? She asked, trying to mask the anxiety that crept into her tone. Gregory nodded. He's inside. But there's something you need to know first. Maria's chest tightened. What do you mean? Gregory stepped aside, allowing her to enter. The inside of the warehouse was just as bleak as the outside. The dim light filtering through the broken windows cast long shadows across the cracked concrete floor. In the distance, she could hear the faint murmur of voices. Follow me, Gregory said. He led her down a long hallway toward a small, isolated room in the back. As they walked, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that everything about this situation was wrong. She had never imagined she would be standing here, in this abandoned warehouse, about to meet a man who was clearly embroiled in something dark and dangerous. When they reached the door, Gregory stopped. Be prepared, he warned quietly. This is bigger than you think. You're not just meeting Jack. You're about to be involved in something you didn't sign up for. Maria nodded, though her heart raced with anxiety. She couldn't back out now. She had come this far. Gregory knocked once, then pushed the door open. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Jack stood by the window, his back to her, staring out at the empty lot. He was different today. His shoulders were tense, his posture rigid, like he was bracing for something. He turned when he heard the door open, his eyes locking with Maria's. Maria, Jack said softly, his voice rough. I didn't want you to get dragged into this. You shouldn't be here. Maria felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had never seen him like this, so distant, so resigned. She had seen the pain in his eyes before, but now it was something darker, something more final. I'm already here, she replied firmly, walking toward him. I made my choice. I can't turn back now. Jack looked at her for a moment, his gaze softening just slightly. He took a step closer, his voice lowering to a near whisper. This isn't just about us anymore, Maria. People will come after you, after Leo. I don't want you involved in this, but there's no way to stop it now. You've already seen too much. Maria shook her head, her heart pounding in her chest. I didn't know what I was stepping into, but I'm not afraid. I won't leave you. There was a long pause. Jack seemed to be wrestling with something inside, a decision he hadn't yet made. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders slumping. Thank you, he said quietly. I don't deserve it, but thank you. Gregory, who had been standing in the corner, spoke up. We don't have much time. We need to move quickly. Maria turned to him, the weight of everything finally sinking in. She had no idea what she was walking into, but there was no turning back now. The people who had been searching for Jack, the ones who wanted whatever he knew, would stop at nothing to get it. And now, they were after her too. What do we do now? Maria asked, her voice steady despite the storm of fear inside her. Gregory's expression was hard, determined. We prepare for what's coming. And we fight. As they left the room and made their way deeper into the warehouse, Maria realized that her life would never be the same. She had crossed a line, and now, all she could do was follow through and hope that she had the strength to survive whatever came next. The weight of the situation bore down on Maria with every passing second. She had thought the hardest part was deciding to get involved. But now, as she stood in the cold, dim-lit warehouse with Jack and Gregory, the reality of it all hit her like a tidal wave. She had no idea how deep this ran or what she was truly stepping into. Jack, the soldier she had tried to help, was entangled in something far darker than she had ever imagined. The choices they made from here on out would shape their futures, and they weren't guaranteed a good outcome. The quiet hum of the warehouse felt suffocating as they moved to a small back office, where Gregory had insisted they set up their plans. The room was minimal, just a few chairs, a cluttered desk, and a single overhead light that flickered intermittently. Maria looked around, feeling the walls close in. Every step she took seemed to echo through the building. Sit, Gregory said, his voice firm but not unkind. We need to talk strategy. Maria complied, sitting down at the small wooden table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She could feel Jack's presence beside her, his quiet energy simmering just under the surface. His shoulders were stiff, and she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. It was as if he had been running on fumes for too long, trying to outrun a storm that had already caught up with him. Gregory sat across from them, looking between them both. The situation is more critical than I originally thought, he said, his voice low but urgent. We've been keeping an eye on things, but the people Jack's involved with, the ones we've been trying to protect him from, are closing in. They'll stop at nothing to find him. And when they do, everything Jack knows will be exposed. Maria's heart pounded in her chest. She had expected this, but hearing it out loud, in such stark terms, made it all feel too real. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was in the thick of it. Who are they? Maria asked, her voice unsteady but determined. She had to know the enemy if she was going to survive this. Gregory leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with a mixture of caution and frustration. The people after Jack are connected to a covert military operation, an operation that went off the rails years ago. Jack was one of the few left alive who knows what really happened, who knows how deep the corruption runs. But he doesn't have all the details. And that's what they want. They think if they can get to him, they can find out everything he knows. Jack's hands were clenched into fists on the table, his jaw tight as he listened to Gregory's words. Maria could see the conflict in his eyes. He was caught between fear and the need to protect everyone else from his past. She reached out and gently placed her hand on his, offering him a small comfort. Why didn't you tell me about this before? Maria asked softly, her eyes searching Jack's face. She needed to understand. She needed to know why he hadn't shared the full truth with her. Jack hesitated, then sighed, his voice heavy with regret. Because I didn't want you to get dragged into this. I thought I could handle it alone. But I was wrong. And now you're in this with me. He looked up at her, his eyes haunted. I'm sorry. Maria felt a pang of sympathy for him. She understood why he had kept the truth hidden. But she also knew that the consequences of keeping secrets were much greater than what they had imagined. And now, there was no turning back. What do we do now? Maria asked, her voice steady. Her heart was racing, but she couldn't let fear paralyze her. She needed to act. Gregory's gaze flicked to Jack, and then back to Maria. We prepare for the worst. They know Jack's still alive, and they've been tracking us. They'll be coming for us soon. We need to make sure we're ready to move. But the problem is, they're already getting too close. Jack stood up abruptly, his fists slamming against the table. I'm not going to let them take us. I've already lost too much, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I've been running for far too long. It's time to face this. Maria stood as well, her body tense with the same urgency she could feel in Jack. What do we need to do? She asked, her voice calm despite the storm brewing inside her. Gregory gave her a sharp look, as though assessing her commitment. Then he nodded. We need to move fast. They've got resources, people inside law enforcement, private contractors, so we're not dealing with just ordinary criminals. We're up against professionals, and they'll stop at nothing to get what they want. We need to get Jack somewhere safe where they won't be able to track him down immediately. Maria could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on her. She wasn't just helping Jack anymore. She was putting herself and her son directly in the crosshairs. But the thought of turning away, of walking out on Jack when he needed her most, was impossible. Where do we go? She asked, her voice firm. Gregory's eyes flicked to Jack before he spoke again. There's a safe house in the city. It's remote, off the grid. We can lay low there for a while until we figure out our next move. But getting there will be the hard part. We'll have to be careful. Jack's gaze met hers, and for the first time, there was a flicker of hope in his eyes, mixed with determination. We can do this. We don't have a choice. The tension in the room was palpable. Maria could see the conflict in Jack's face, his fear of what was to come, and his reluctance to drag her further into this. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back. I'm in, Maria said firmly, her voice unwavering. Gregory gave her a small nod of approval. Good. We leave at dawn. The drive to the safe house was long and silent. The streets outside Oakridge became less familiar as they veered further from the town into rural territory. The roads were empty, no signs of life for miles. The tension in the car was thick, the only sound the low hum of the engine and the occasional snap of static on the radio. Maria's mind raced as she stared out the window, the passing landscape a blur of trees and fields. What had she gotten herself into? Was she prepared for the weight of what lay ahead? She didn't know. She only knew one thing for sure. There was no going back now. Jack sat in the passenger seat, his face shadowed, his fingers tapping nervously on his leg. He hadn't said much since they left the warehouse, but Maria could feel the turmoil inside him. This wasn't just about escaping from danger. This was about confronting his past and all the demons he had left behind. He was running not just from those who were chasing him, but from a part of himself that he didn't know how to face. We'll be okay, Maria said quietly, her voice breaking the silence. Jack glanced at her, his expression softening slightly. I hope so, he murmured, though his words lacked conviction. He didn't believe it himself. The night stretched on, and as they neared the safe house, the mood only grew heavier. Maria could feel it, the threat that was hanging over them. She couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was already closer than they realized. When they finally arrived at the safe house, it was just as Gregory had promised. Hidden in a secluded part of the city, the house was nondescript, small, but sturdy, and away from prying eyes. There were no signs of life around it, no indication that anyone had been there recently. Gregory unlocked the door, and they stepped inside, the air cool and stale. Maria felt a strange mix of relief and dread wash over her. This was it. They were here. They had made it this far. But it was only the beginning. As the door closed behind them, the reality of what lay ahead settled in. They were in hiding now, for as long as it took. And they couldn't afford to make a single mistake. Jack looked at Maria as they entered the house, his face unreadable. We'll be okay here for now, he said quietly, his voice hoarse. But we can't stay long. Maria nodded, her mind already racing ahead. She didn't know what the next move would be, or how they were going to survive this. But she knew one thing. They would fight. They had no choice but to. In that moment, Maria realized that this fight wasn't just about surviving. It was about finding the strength to face the truth, no matter how dangerous it was. And whatever happened next, she would stand by Jack. No matter what. The days in hiding at the safe house felt like a blur of tension and uncertainty. Every morning, Maria woke up with a knot in her stomach, dreading the day ahead while also feeling a strange relief at the momentary peace the secluded house provided. She had come to accept that this life, this new reality, was something she couldn't escape from. Not anymore. Jack, too, had grown quieter in the past few days. His eyes, once filled with anger and frustration, now seemed hollow, lost. He would spend hours in the back room, pacing and running through mental plans, his hands trembling as he tried to put together the pieces of the puzzle that had been his life. Maria had seen that look in his eyes before, when he had told her he didn't know who he was anymore, when the weight of his past seemed to drown him. But this time, there was something different. He wasn't just lost in his past anymore. He was trying to move forward. He had made the choice. He wouldn't run anymore. He wouldn't let fear dictate his life. And now, as much as it terrified him, he was ready to face what was coming. The days blended into nights, but Maria knew, deep down, that it was time to confront whatever came next. They couldn't stay hidden forever. They couldn't keep running from the truth. The truth of what Jack knew, the people who wanted it, and the consequences of them all. One evening, Gregory appeared at the safe house unexpectedly. His face was grim, his usual composed demeanor cracking under the pressure of the news he brought. "It's happening sooner than we thought," he said, his voice low and strained. Maria and Jack exchanged a quick glance before they turned to Gregory. "What's happening?" Maria asked, her voice steady but her heart hammering in her chest. Gregory sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The people after Jack, they're closer than we realized. The cover we've been hiding under is slipping. They've found traces of us. And soon, they'll come for us in full force." Jack stood up abruptly, his fists clenching as he processed the words. "I can't keep running," he said, his voice full of determination. "It's time to fight." Maria nodded, her stomach twisting with a mix of fear and resolve. She had never imagined herself caught up in something like this, but now, the truth was clear. She couldn't walk away. They had to face it all. Together. Gregory gave a reluctant nod. "We've been planning, gathering intel. But the real decision now lies with you, Jack," he said. "Do you face this head-on, knowing what's at stake? Or do you try to go further into hiding and risk more people getting hurt?" Maria's heart sank as the weight of Gregory's words hit her. There was no easy way out. Jack had been running from this for too long. And now, it was clear, he couldn't escape anymore. "Jack," Maria said softly, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. You're not alone in this." Jack turned to her, his expression hardening with new resolve. "I'm not alone," he whispered. Then, he looked to Gregory. "Let's do this. Let's finish this." Gregory's eyes met Jack's with a mix of approval and respect. "We've been waiting for you to say that," he said. "Now, let's put the plan into motion." The hours that followed were a blur of preparation. They fortified the safe house, readying everything for the inevitable confrontation. Gregory had made contact with a few trusted allies, and now it was time to act. Jack and Maria worked together, planning their next move, each step bringing them closer to the truth and the danger that lay ahead. As the night approached, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change irrevocably. The air in the safe house felt thick with anticipation, the weight of what was to come pressing down on her shoulders. But she had made her choice. She had chosen to stay, to fight, to stand by Jack. Jack walked over to her, his gaze steady. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked, his voice low. Maria met his eyes without hesitation. "I'm sure. Whatever happens, we face it together." They embraced for a long moment, the reality of what was to come settling in. Then, as if a signal had been given, they broke apart and turned to Gregory, who was already at the door. "Time to go," Gregory said, his voice quiet but full of purpose. "We've got one shot at this." They left the safe house together, walking into the night with no promises of what tomorrow would bring. There would be no going back. This was it, the final confrontation. The fight that followed was nothing short of chaos. Gunshots rang out in the night air, the sound echoing through the quiet streets. Shadows moved swiftly, each one a reminder of the danger that lurked in every corner. Jack fought with everything he had, his training kicking in as he pushed forward, determined to end this once and for all. Maria stayed close, her nerves firing, her heart racing, but she didn't falter. She was there for him. She had promised, and she would keep that promise. The people who had been chasing Jack were relentless, but they underestimated him. They underestimated Maria too. What they didn't count on was the bond between them, the resolve they shared. Together, They were unstoppable. As dawn broke, the fighting ceased. Jack stood tall, his chest heaving as he wiped the sweat from his brow. The people after him had been dealt with. The mission was over. But the consequences of their actions were far-reaching. They had taken down a dangerous network of criminals, and Jack, though battered, had found some semblance of peace. But this fight had cost them something too: time, innocence, and their safety. Maria stood beside Jack, her gaze steady as she took in the quiet aftermath. "We did it," she said softly, though the words felt hollow in the light of everything they had been through. Jack nodded, but there was no joy in his eyes. "We did. But there's more to come." Maria squeezed his hand, a quiet promise between them. They had fought the darkness, and though they had won this battle, the road ahead was still uncertain, but they would face it together. As the two of them walked away from the wreckage, the rising sun cast a warm light over the horizon. For the first time in a long while, Maria allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. In the end, Maria's journey proved that even in the most dangerous of circumstances, the strength of human connection can light the way. As Jack faced his past, Maria chose to stand by him, demonstrating that even in the face of overwhelming fear, one simple act of kindness can lead to a much larger and more impactful journey. Have you ever been thrust into a situation you weren't prepared for? Do you think kindness has the power to change lives, even in the darkest times? Join the conversation below and share your thoughts on this powerful journey of bravery, trust, and survival. Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping, emotional stories of courage and determination.